My husband and I were on a date when his mother showed up and yelled, "You're not spending our inheritance on her." He shrugged and said, "She's my wife now." I smiled, pulled out my phone, and said, "Then let's add a prenup to that check, shall we?" You know how sometimes you're sitting in a nice restaurant, candlelight flickering, thinking life might actually be settling down, and then a hurricane walks through the door in the form of your new mother-in-law? Yeah, that was me. I'm Harper Dawson, 39 years old. Event planner living in Asheville, North Carolina. Specialist in outdoor weddings and corporate retreats. Also a specialist in pretending to be calm while things fall apart around me, because that's just the job sometimes. I met Clay Benson 3 years ago at a food truck festival. He was wearing a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt, trying to eat a burger the size of his head, laughing like a man who had never been burned before. He was warm, real. After a few years of dating the wrong kind of men, the ones who loved the chase more than they loved me, Clay was different. He stayed. He listened. He didn't flinch when I was messy or tired or scared. He made me believe in safe love. Clay proposed after a year and a half. Simple. Sunset. Just us. No big speeches. No fireworks. Just a soft, "You're my best friend. Marry me?" I said yes before I even realized the words were out of my mouth. It felt easy. Natural. Right. What didn't feel easy? His family. The Bensons were old money. Not Vanderbilt old, but definitely enough generational wealth to think they were. They had the kind of house with separate staircases for staff that hadn't been used in decades, but were still meticulously cleaned every Thursday. His mother, Marjorie Benson, made it clear from the start that I was not their kind of people. I didn't go to the right schools. Didn't summer in the right towns. Didn't know how to play tennis without looking like a fool. Clay always brushed it off. "They'll come around," he'd say, kissing my forehead. I wanted to believe him. The wedding was small. Partly because I wanted it that way. Mostly because Marjorie had declared she wouldn't be seen at some cheap garden wedding and then mysteriously forgot to RSVP. Clay didn't care. "I'm marrying you," he said. "Not her." And he did. On a rainy April afternoon in the botanical gardens, surrounded by friends who actually liked us. No drama. No screaming. Just love. Or so I thought. 6 months later, we were sitting in our favorite Italian place downtown, the one with the mismatched tablecloths and homemade cannoli, celebrating Clay landing a huge client at his architecture firm. We were laughing, leaning over the tiny table, holding hands like teenagers. And then the door slammed open. Marjorie Benson stormed in, pearls clutched tight around her neck, eyes blazing. The entire restaurant went dead silent. She marched right up to our table, her heels clicking furiously against the tile, pointed a trembling finger right at me, and yelled, "You're not spending our inheritance on her." The world froze. Clay didn't even blink. He just shrugged casually, as if she had commented on the weather. "She's my wife now," he said simply. I sat there stunned. Watching the two of them. Watching the restaurant full of strangers pretend not to listen while absolutely hanging on every word. I smiled slowly. Pulled out my phone. Opened the Notes app where I had the draft saved. Because once you grow up dealing with complicated families, you learn to prepare for everything. And said, in the calmest voice I could muster, "Then let's add a prenup to that check, shall we? You think you're prepared for your in-laws once you get married. You think I've been around them enough, it'll be fine. They'll come around eventually." And then reality slaps you across the face at your favorite Italian restaurant on a random Tuesday night. My name's Harper Dawson, 39 years old. Event planner based out of Asheville, North Carolina. I'm the kind of woman who double knots her shoelaces, keeps extra granola bars in her purse, and doesn't cry over little stuff anymore. I built my career from the ground up. No fancy degrees. No family name to lean on. Just stubbornness, long hours, and a belief that I deserved a good life. When I met Clay Benson, I thought maybe, just maybe, life was finally giving me a break. He wasn't flashy. Wasn't loud. He was steady. Kind. The kind of man who pulled over to help change a stranger's tire and still called his grandmother every Sunday afternoon. We got married under the weeping willows at the Asheville Botanical Gardens. Small ceremony. Simple vows. Nothing extravagant. Exactly what I wanted. Clay's parents, Marjorie and Charles Benson, showed up late, sat stiffly through the ceremony, and left before the first dance. Marjorie didn't even bother hiding her disapproval. She told anyone who would listen that I was ambitious in a concerning way. Clay told her, more than once, to back off. But she never really listened. Not to him. And definitely not to me. 6 months later, Clay landed the biggest client of his career, a real estate developer looking to redesign half the downtown district. It was huge. We decided to celebrate with dinner at Pietro's, this cozy little hole-in-the-wall Italian place we loved. Nothing fancy. Just good pasta and warm bread and laughter that felt easy. We were halfway through our meal, me twirling fettuccine onto my fork, Clay telling me about his pitch, when the door slammed open so hard the little bell above it nearly flew off. Every head in the restaurant turned. And there she was. Marjorie Benson, in all her furious, pearl-clutching glory. She zeroed in on our table like a missile. The murmur of conversation died instantly. All you could hear was the soft clinking of silverware being set down and the quiet shuffle of people trying not to look, but absolutely looking. She marched right up, heels stabbing the floor, finger pointing straight at me, and shouted, "You're not spending our inheritance on her." The words hung in the air, thick and ugly. I froze. Fork halfway to my mouth. Clay, God bless him, didn't even flinch. He set his wine glass down calmly, turned to his mother, and said, clear enough for the whole place to hear, "She's my wife now." Just that. No anger. No shouting. Just a simple, immovable fact. Marjorie's face twisted. Her hands, manicured, trembling, clutched her designer purse tighter. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "You already made one," Clay said, his voice cool. "By thinking you get to decide how I live my life." Marjorie's mouth opened like she was ready to unleash another tirade. But I was already moving. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and tapped to open the document I had saved weeks ago, a simple prenup draft. I stood up slowly, calmly, smoothing my dress, and smiled. "Then let's add a prenup to that check, shall we?" I turned the screen toward her, letting the header, Benson-Dawson Prenuptial Agreement, glare up at her. Her face went dead white. For a second, the only sound was the soft hum of the restaurant's old ceiling fan. Then someone, a table over, let out a stifled laugh. Marjorie snapped her mouth shut. Her eyes flickered from the screen to me to Clay and back again. She looked ready to combust. But she didn't say another word. Didn't dare. Clay stood up, sliding his arm around my waist. "We'll email you the finalized version tomorrow," he said, kissing my temple. And then, with complete casualness, we walked right out of that restaurant, leaving Marjorie standing there, still clutching her pearls like they might save her from the reality that she'd just lost. We stepped out into the cool Asheville night. The air smelled like rain on pavement and basil from the tiny herb shop across the street. Clay squeezed my hand once, tight and sure. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him, this man who had just told his mother, in front of half the town, that I came first. And for the first time in a long time, I really believed it. I nodded. "I'm good," I said, voice steady. "Better than good." He smiled, that slow, crinkly-eyed smile I loved, and kissed the back of my hand. "Let's go home," he said. The ride was quiet, but not the bad kind of quiet. The kind where you're just at peace. I leaned my head against the window, watching the streetlights blur past, feeling the weight of Marjorie's words sliding off me like old skin. She didn't own me. She didn't even know me. And after tonight, she wouldn't get the chance to hurt me again. When we got home, Clay tossed his keys in the bowl by the door and turned to face me. "She's gonna call," he said. I shrugged. Let her. He watched me for a long moment, like he was trying to memorize my face, trying to figure out how I wasn't more rattled. "You really had that prenup ready?" he asked, half laughing, half shocked. I grinned, kicking off my shoes. "I grew up watching women lose everything because they thought love would protect them," I said simply. "I love you, but I love myself too." Clay crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into a hug so tight it knocked the air out of me. "I don't want your money," he said into my hair. "I want your life. With me. Whatever that looks like." I closed my eyes, breathed him in. "I know," I whispered. And I did. The next morning, true to Clay's prediction, Marjorie called. 6 times. Then she texted. "Marjorie, we need to talk." "Marjorie, this is unacceptable." "Marjorie, you're tearing this family apart." Clay just glanced at his phone, sighed, and tossed it face down onto the coffee table. "Ignore her," he said. I nodded, but I could feel that familiar tension creeping up my spine. Because ignoring Marjorie was never that simple. She didn't lose gracefully. Sure enough, by that afternoon, Clay's cousin Lindsay had called him. Then his Uncle Tom. Then his Aunt Cheryl. All with the same subtle, syrupy messages. "Maybe Harper's not a good influence. Maybe you should slow down. Maybe you're making a mistake." Clay listened to them all. Politely. Patiently. And then he blocked half of them. Without saying a word to me. That night, sitting on the couch in our small living room, he looked over at me. "I'm sorry they're like this," he said. "You're not responsible for their choices," I said. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "You know, I think I always knew they'd hate whoever I married. It was never really about you. I smiled a little, sad and soft. I know. He reached over and took my hand. We're gonna be okay. I squeezed his fingers. We already are. The next few weeks were a strange mix of calm and chaos. Most days were normal, morning coffees together, Clay heading off to work with a quick kiss, me answering emails from brides and corporate managers who thought their conference should feel like a Coachella event. But under it all, there was a hum. A low, persistent vibration of tension. Because Marjorie wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It started small. Little things. A curt email from the family lawyer about reviewing trust disbursements. A chilly voicemail from Charles Benson, dripping with disappointment. A vague invitation to a family meeting at the old estate house. Clay ignored most of it, but it still wore on him. I could see it in the way he stared longer at his coffee some mornings, like he was building up the energy to fight battles he hadn't even started yet. Then, one Sunday morning, there was a knock at our door. I peeked through the peephole. Marjorie, holding a thick white envelope and a face like a thundercloud. Clay stood up from the couch. You don't have to deal with her, he said quickly. I smiled. Calm. Unbothered. I know, I said. But I want to. I opened the door, leaning casually against the frame, arms crossed. Marjorie, I said, voice light. To what do we owe the pleasure? She pushed the envelope toward me like it was a B&B she wanted off her hands. You'll need to sign these, she said. I didn't move to take it. What are they? Papers. To ensure that the inheritance stays in the family. I smiled sweetly. You mean papers to make sure I don't steal your precious money? Her jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard her teeth grind. You're not one of us, she snapped. You never will be. I nodded thoughtfully. Good, I said. Because I'd rather be me than be whatever it is you are. Her nostrils flared. She thrust the envelope closer. If you care about Clay, you'll do this. I laughed, soft, genuinely amused. If you cared about Clay, you'd let him be happy. Clay stepped up behind me then, his hand resting low on my back. He didn't say a word. Didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. He wasn't choosing her. He was choosing me. Choosing us. I reached out, took the envelope, held it up, and then, very deliberately, I ripped it cleanly in half. Marjorie gasped like I had physically slapped her. Clay just tightened his hand on my waist, steady and sure. I stepped back. Goodbye, Marjorie, I said simply, and closed the door in her stunned, furious face. Inside, I leaned back against the door and let out a long breath. Clay turned me around, cupping my face in his hands. I'm sorry, he said again, his forehead resting against mine. I shook my head, smiling. I'm not. And I wasn't. Because sometimes you have to burn bridges behind you to light the way forward. After that day, things shifted. Marjorie didn't show up again. No more phone calls. No more emails. No more surprise visits. Just silence. It was almost eerie at first, like waiting for a second shoe to drop. But eventually, the silence became comforting. Like finally shutting off a blaring alarm that had been ringing in the background of our lives for too long. Clay and I talked about it one night, sitting on the porch swing with a blanket wrapped around us and a half-empty bottle of wine between us. You know she'll probably cut me out of the will, he said, half joking, half serious. I leaned my head against his shoulder. You okay with that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he shrugged. I don't want money that comes with a leash attached. I smiled into the fabric of his shirt. Good. Because I never planned on being anyone's charity case. He kissed the top of my head. I know that, he said. It's one of the first things I loved about you. The next few months were the kind of good that sneaks up on you. Small, steady good. Mornings with coffee on the porch. Afternoons running errands together, laughing over nothing. Evenings spent cooking ridiculous, complicated meals from scratch just because we could. My business took off too. Not in some huge, flashy way. But steadily. Word got around about the event planner who actually listened, who didn't roll her eyes when clients had wild ideas, who made things happen without making them feel small. I got to be selective. Got to choose clients who respected my time, my skills, my worth. It was the kind of success that feels warm instead of sharp. The kind that fills you up instead of hollowing you out. Sometimes, late at night when Clay was already asleep beside me, I thought about everything that had happened. About the woman I used to be, the one who would have bent herself in half to be good enough for people like Marjorie. And the woman I was now, the one who smiled as she ripped up an envelope full of expectations she never asked for. One afternoon, months later, Clay got a formal letter. From the Benson family lawyer. He opened it standing at the kitchen counter while I chopped vegetables for dinner. He skimmed it, then left, short and sharp. What is it? I asked. He handed it to me. It was a notice, formal and cold, stating that he was officially removed from any future inheritance distributions. No apology, no explanation, just a clean cut. I read it once, twice, then set it down. Clay watched me wary. Are you mad? I shook my head. No, I said simply. I'm proud. And I was. Because he chose us. He chose love. He chose himself. Not the money, not the status, not the legacy of controlling, conditional love that Marjorie had tried to shackle him to his whole life. Just us. Clay smiled, real and wide and boyish, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like basil and fresh air. We're gonna be just fine, he said into my hair. I laughed softly. We already are. Fall came early to Asheville that year. The mornings were crisp and golden, the mountains wrapped in soft mist like something out of a painting. Clay and I settled into something easy, something real. A life without the constant undercurrent of trying to earn someone's approval. A life that belonged to us. We started traditions, the kind that didn't seem like much at first, but grew into something sacred. Friday night pizza on the porch swing. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. Arguing over which apples made the best pie. Lazy Sunday drives through the Blue Ridge Parkway with the windows down and music too loud. Simple things. But they stitched our life together tighter than any amount of family money or fancy parties ever could. Sometimes Clay's phone would buzz with a number he didn't recognize. And sometimes he'd pick it up, listen for a second, and then hang up without saying a word. He never told me what they said. I never asked. Some battles you don't have to fight once you've already won by walking away. One rainy afternoon, I was curled up in my office at home, putting the final touches on a wedding proposal for a sweet couple who wanted a barn wedding in the mountains, when Clay popped his head in. You busy? He asked, grinning. I spun around in my chair. Technically, I said. But what's up? He held out a small, slightly crumpled envelope. No return address. Just our names written in a stiff, familiar script. I took it carefully. Opened it. Inside was a card. Plain white. Inside, a single sentence. I hope you're happy. No signature. No apology. No ownership. Just that. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. No satisfaction either, really. Just a kind of quiet certainty that the universe had closed a door for good. I set the card down on the desk. Clay watched me, eyebrows raised. I shrugged. I am happy, I said simply. He smiled. Me too. And just like that, it didn't matter anymore. That night, we built a fire in the backyard, just a little one in the old stone pit Clay's grandfather had laid down decades ago. We roasted marshmallows until they caught fire and laughed until our stomachs hurt. At some point, Clay tossed the card into the flames. It caught instantly, curling into ash without so much as a whisper. Gone. Just like the weight of their approval I realized I had never actually needed. The sky above us was endless and star-punched, stretching wide over the mountains. I leaned into Clay's side, feeling his arms settle around me. You ever think about what it could have been like if things were different? He asked quietly. I thought about it for a second. About fake smiles and tense dinners and biting my tongue until it bled. No, I said, snuggling closer. This is better. He kissed the side of my head. Yeah, he said. It is. Winter rolled in soft and slow. The mountains wore their frost like a crown, and the mornings turned sharp and still. Our life stayed simple. Good. Ours. On New Year's Eve, Clay and I sat on the porch, bundled up in blankets, a little heater buzzing at our feet. No parties. No crowds. Just us and a bottle of cheap champagne. We talked about the year. About the fights we didn't have to have. The apologies we didn't have to drag out of each other. The peace we had built, brick by brick, in the quiet after Marjorie's storm. You ever regret walking away from it all? I asked, twirling the stem of my glass between my fingers. Clay thought about it. Really thought. Then he shook his head. No, he said. I think walking away was the first thing I ever really did for myself. I smiled, tipped my glass toward him. To doing things for ourselves, I said. He clinked his glass against mine. To us. Around midnight, we heard fireworks in the distance, tiny pops and bursts of color somewhere over downtown. We stayed wrapped together on the porch, watching the faint glimmers through the trees. And when the clock struck 12, he pulled me close, kissed me slow and deep, and whispered, Happy New Year, Mrs. Benson. And for the first time, the name didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a choice. Mine. Months later, I heard from an old friend that Marjorie and Charles were still clinging to their money like it could fill the emptiness we had left behind. Still hosting grand dinners. Still pretending everything was perfect. But their circle was smaller. Colder. Their empire of appearances crumbling at the edges while they desperately pretended nothing had changed. Because money can buy a lot of things. But it can't buy back the people you pushed away. It can't fix the silence you created. Meanwhile, Clay and I kept building. He opened his own architecture firm, Benson Designs, taking only the projects he believed in. I expanded my event planning business, slowly, carefully. We bought a little cabin in the woods just outside Asheville, nothing fancy, but it had a wraparound porch and enough trees to feel like the rest of the world was a rumor. We planted a garden. Got a goofy rescue dog named Gus who thought he was a lapdog despite weighing 80 pounds. We laughed a lot. Loved harder. Lived deeper. Every once in a while, when the fire crackled low and the night grew still, I thought about Marjorie. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with a quiet kind of gratitude. Because if she hadn't tried so hard to control us, we might not have learned so early how strong we really were. How much joy there is in choosing your own peace, your own people, your own life. And that was the real inheritance. Not a check. Not a trust fund. Not some dusty family name. Freedom. Love. A life built by our own hands.